Bienvenidos, mi gente. Today on our mental health series, we're diving deeper into conversations that matter, the ones that help us strengthen our families, support our community, and break the silence around mental health in the Latino world. We're bringing new perspectives, new questions, and a new understanding. So let's get right into it. First and foremost, would you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what it is that you do?
Uh, my name is Vilma Vendrell. I'm one of the clinical managers over at Hillside's Children's Center. It's a residential facility for youth who need different supports behaviorally, with mental health here in the Rochester area.
Well, what do you think is the most important message you want our Latino listeners to understand about mental health today?
I think one of the most important messages I can give is that mental health is just as important as physical health. Sometimes we really get, especially as Latinos, we're like, you have to keep echándole pa'lante and just forgetting that it's not just our physical health that is important, it's also our mental health to be able to navigate a lot of what we do on the everyday. Just even within our homes, within the community, and just globally what's going on, that we really do have to take care of ourselves. So to really normalize those conversations and experiences for everyone.
Sure. And other subjects or struggles that have been taboo in our community for too long, things that might be hurting our families because we just don't talk about them?
Whew, yeah. We don't talk enough about like depression and anxiety and just some of the things that like some of the traumas that we've experienced. And I'm not talking about when people think trauma, they think about, different types of abuse, just, the traumas of children growing up in households where, families have to work 2-3 jobs and really have to almost be more adult too early. We don't talk enough about those things. We kind of have that mentality of lo que pasa en casa se queda en casa, where it's really about whatever happens at home. You're supposed to just navigate it at home, and we should be able to have those conversations outside. Like, yes, I might be struggling with this, and being able to have those conversations in real time is important.
Vilma, you mentioned about one having to grow up too early. Can you give us an example of how that affects your mental health?
When kids, and usually it's more the adolescents, mom, parents, I don't want to even say it's just mom or dad, but caregivers may have to work 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and kids are now responsible for feeding themselves. That in and of itself, sometimes it's hard because now we have to also, as caregivers, hope that we've provided them with those skills to be able to do that for themselves. And then in the same breath, now we're feeling guilty and a lot of shame that our children have to do that versus the traditional. When we think about, 5 o'clock is dinner's on the table. That's not a reality for many people.
Right. And how do financial stress, like working multiple jobs or supporting families back home, impact mental health within Latino households?
A lot of families really struggle with trying to maintain their own households, especially now with, so many changes, trying to maintain their households and as well as continue or begin to help support those back, whether it's if they're helping families back in their home country, or just within the area, just being able to support each other. That's been, between shame and guilt of not being able to. Or just the expectations that family, it was like, that's family, you're supposed to help. And sometimes that's just hard to say no.
Yeah, for sure. And what effects are you seeing from social media when it comes to self-esteem and emotional health among Latino youths and adults?
There's like a love-hate relationship with social media. It's definitely something that, as far as impacts like it just impacts our self-esteem because we're comparing, like when we look at social media, a lot of people look at it as an escape, to look just scroll and just do that mindlessly. And sometimes people forget that they're comparing their lowlights in their life, like the lower times in their life, to someone else's highlights, because they're not putting everything out there. And, really between those comparisons, or just misinformation for some, depending on where they're scrolling. And again, it's a love-hate relationship because there are a lot of spaces that do offer a lot of good information to really open up those conversations, and then others that kind of twisted in a way that, and again, they don't know. So it's really, it's like a both.
Right. And you say information, right? Good versus bad. What is the balance between that? Is there a lot more bad information that may be false compared to good?
That one's a difficult question because social media is all around about the algorithm. So they
Yes.
really do go
Good
based
point.
on what you're searching for.
Right. Good point.
So if you're searching for something, you're going to find it and it may not
Yeah.
be what you're really needing, but it may be what you're looking for.
Sure.
So it's really going to be it's going to be important to really have those at least initial spaces to find that information first and then kind of navigate or correct that algorithm, so to speak.
Yeah, and everybody algorithm is different.
Yeah.
It is, certainly
Yeah.
is. For parents listening, how can they tell when a child's behavior is more than just acting out, when it might be a sign of emotional stress or a deeper mental health issue?
For a lot of parents, esp- especially when you're so used to, or you're almost ingrained to, work, and then, and then they're getting a different message, especially in social media, be kids and do this. So some of the things that we might not see as, or we might see as a concern, sleeping a lot.
Right.
But now we're talking about like we're sleeping a lot more, not just within a few days, because that's normal to kind of, especially when there's any changes, to really kind of adjust to the change. But now if you're noticing, they're sleeping too much, crying too much, and sometimes I joke around, it's cold in season,
Sure.
sniffling season. But if you start hearing that in the just ask, again, normalize the conversation. Hey, are you okay? Is everything good? Is it the sniffles? Or have you been crying?
Yeah.
You want to be able to kind of gauge for that, but also without judgment.
Yeah.
So hey, what's going on?
Yeah, it could be tough for a parent, though.
Yeah, it's tough because it's conversations we're not used to. Usually it's like we're told how we're feeling, or
Right.
fix your face.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned that you're told how you're feeling, explain a little bit of how that affects people, because it certainly does bother me.
Yeah, it is very invalidating.
Yeah.
And people, and again, it's not always done maliciously.
Right.
But it's very invalidating when somebody says, "Oh, you're fine. You're not. You should be okay with this." Or everyone goes through this. And again, things that we hear every day, we don't really think about it. But then we're not there to understand like what they might be going through or what other things are adding to it. So just that judgment piece. In asking those questions, or even just saying, I'm here if you need to talk to me.
Yeah,
Can be a world of
big
difference.
difference. Yeah, for sure. What unique mental health challenges do bilingual or bicultural Latinos face trying to balance life between two cultures?
It's like we're really trying to be Latino enough and American enough, if that makes sense. In one space where we're in our homes, we're in our local communities, and that's where we really show like all the cultura. We really show it. But then in certain workspaces, depending on where we work, we may not be able to do that. And it's unfortunate, but in some spaces, even speaking Spanish or anything, even if it's just our little metaphors or something, is really off-putting to some people, and then we have to kind of navigate that. And again, luckily it's fewer in between, but still something that's real, and just navigating that is hard for some people. And even outside of the workspace, because it doesn't always have to be in the workspace, just between our personal and just navigating the communities, and the spaces that we are receiving mental health services or receiving medical care. Sometimes that does make it hard, because it's like just explaining how you feel in Spanish doesn't always translate. And then people just really take for face value what's happening.
Right. Yes, absolutely. In our community, many people take care of elders or sick family members. What mental health support do caregivers need that they often don't ask for?
Help. Just help. They're often seen like I'm the one giving the help. So I shouldn't be asking, or I volunteered for this. So this is the cross I have to carry. And it's like, yeah, but you can ask for help. You can ask for a break, to say, I just need a little bit of break to care. And even harder, like I can't do it anymore. And again, it's one of those, almost feels like we don't do that. Like, Latinos don't do that. We don't put our families in places. And it's like, and that's not to say that that has to happen, but sometimes those conversations do. And that's hard for caregivers to even think like, no, I'm going to just do this regardless.
Can
And
you
it's
give us
like
an example of like what are the results of someone who doesn't have that support?
feeling isolated, feeling lonely.
Certainly
Just-
overwhelmed.
Yeah, completely overwhelmed, depression, anxiety. And so now they're tackling their own mental health as they're caring for someone who might be tackling their own mental health and or physical health.
Yeah, sure. And that could be tough. Yeah. What should our teachers, coaches, and Latino community leaders know to better support the mental well-being of our kids?
Talk to them, talk with them. We often talk about them.
Yeah.
We don't talk to them. Not in the way that they often feel heard. I know it really is a dialect at this point. For a lot of our youth are really hard to understand, but it doesn't mean that they don't have the words to kind of say, and a lot of them don't. Like if we don't have the words as adults sometimes to teach them to our youth, we're not gonna expect our youth to use those words. So just kind of meet them where they're at and just listen.
Yeah, I would definitely say their voice needs to be heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And how does discrimination, whether it's at school, work, or public, affect the mental health of Latinos in Rochester and nationwide for that matter?
We're often taught to kind of put a face or present differently. And I know, like personally growing up, it's like one of those things, you get dressed, you take care of yourself regardless of what's happening inside. And oftentimes that stereotype kind of follows like, oh, they look fine, they're fine. They dressed up, they did their hair, they're fine. And it's like, but they're not. So it's really helping the cohorts or even ourselves to understand like, hey, just asking those questions regardless of what the presentation is in front of you. If there are things that just don't feel right, or just look for things that are just not just face value.
Yeah, yes. And before a crisis happens, what are some simple everyday things families can do at home to protect their mental health?
Creating spaces where you can have those conversations, just normalize the conversations the same way we normalize what we saw on TV, just normalizing those conversations, making sure you take care of, making sure you eat, which is hard if you're running from like job to job or space to space, making sure you eat, making sure you get enough sleep, which again is hard. Because we just don't have the time to kind of do everything, all our obligations, or just the heaviness that's in our mind to even do that for ourselves. As much as possible, normalizing therapy. Therapy isn't a space like that they're going to judge you. They're just a space to help you kind of sort things out, especially if you don't have those spaces to where you feel that you're not going to be judged.
Yeah. And what are some of the struggles that families go through when there are parents who are working 2 jobs or maybe more?
I'm sorry, could you ask that again?
What are the struggles that some families might come into, some problems they might have when there's a parent and sometimes 2 working multiple jobs and they're never home? They don't spend that time with the kids. They don't have that support. And sometimes they don't even have a good relationship. You know, what are some of the problems that we run into?
I mean, it's hard if you value mental health, but you just can't take your child to one. Appointments are not at times that tend to be reasonable, like feasible for people. And a lot of kids don't want to do virtual. They want to be able to talk to someone one-on-one or just feel comfortable, and that is hard. And then in turn, then it's like that guilt of like, I just couldn't give that support to my child because I had to put food on the table, and kind of navigating, which one to prioritize. And so really looking for ways to be able to do that is hard, important, but difficult. So, as far as like providers, more and more are more open to like after hour, like after the 5 o'clock hour sessions to be able to accommodate. But those are far and few in between, especially when, or if it's a family or who just feel more comfortable speaking in Spanish about what they might be going through, and there aren't as many resources for that.
Yeah, the language can be a
Yes.
barrier, right?
Yes.
For sure. Is there a hotline that families can call if they feel they need to?
There are several resources in the community, between the 988 resources, the mobile crisis in the area. Again, they more monolingual, but still be able to find resources to be able to express themselves in Spanish, through interpreting services that they're great through, utilize. Emergency rooms, I know that they're usually the last resort,
Okay.
but sometimes that's the place to be able to find that information you need.
Wow. Yeah. Is there anything I didn't ask you today that you wished I would have?
I mean, I honestly, I think it's important just to recognize that mental health is, it is, again, just as important. And it's just going back to your first question, just as important. And just for us to be able to sit with that, like personally just sit with that. Like, what does that mean for us? Like, what are we trying to look for? And just helping people understand why it's important for them, even if it doesn't make sense to anyone else.
Gotcha. Is there anything you'd like to personally say to anybody who may be watching this video? Can we start with you're not alone?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Like,
Can we start
you know, it's
there?
like I'm thinking, and like I have so
Yeah.
many thoughts about like what would I tell someone? It's like, no, you're not alone in this. And just because the person that you might be sitting, let's say if you know, like thankfully if you do decide to go to therapy, it doesn't mean that the person that's sitting on the other side has not maybe experienced it. So this is something that everyone has gone through, but it can make such a world of difference just to be able to feel seen and heard.
One more question before we wrap things up. Do therapists have therapists?
They better. I would hope so.
Yeah.
No, but no, a lot of, and I do therapy. I probably should have said that, but I do, therapy privately. And no, everyone
Yes.
should have someone, because it's not just your own things that you are holding on to, but now therapists are holding on to all this that they're listening to,
Yeah,
and they should be able to have a place to be able to sort that out.
And I ask you that question because if a therapist can need or use therapy, so can everyone else. You're not alone, and this is not something that decides whether something is wrong or not with you,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, I think we all should seek help if we need it.
No, exactly. We're not just there, and also it's like if you yourself are like struggling, that also helps us to like kind of understand, like if I'm struggling with just the thought of having this discussion, I can only imagine what it's like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Vilma, so much for your time. I appreciate you and your insights.
No,
This
thank you for
mental
having
health
me.
issue. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, everyone who's been listening. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, please like, follow, subscribe, and share this video with someone you think may need to see it. The conversations we're having help us grow, they help us heal, and they help us build a stronger community right here in Rochester. Remember, reaching out is a sign of strength, not weakness. We thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you next time. Thank you, Vilma.
Thank you.